Koka sunarai sunarayanti. 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 Koka sunarai sunarayanti.
Hello, hi, welcome to this new episode of the Mango TV podcast. Today I'm very pleased to have Holly Turiya. Holly Turiya is a woman sexual liberation coach who's in a mission to facilitate the freedom of the hearts and bodies of women so they can love and live from full aliveness. She's trained in the Vita method or Vita method coaching modality, which is a tantric approach to healing sexuality through science and spirit. She lives in Nosara, Costa Rica, and has cultivated a thriving Tantra community in the jungle. Visit her website at www.hollyturiya.com to listen to her weekly podcast and to learn more about her private mentorship journey and online courses. You can also follow her on Instagram at holly.turiya. Welcome, Holly.
Thank you so much for having me here today. What a pleasure.
Thank you. So, yes, just for maybe your followers that are new to the Mango TV podcast. Mango TV is part of this small production company called Mangusta Production. We started in 2007, 2008 to develop a documentary based on Daniel Pinchbeck's work, 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl. I don't know if you remember that book by Pinchbeck. He was considered one of the contemporary Castaneda of, modern contemporary shaman, urban shaman. Anyhow, his idea was that, the 2012 was bringing a tipping point in consciousness and that, global transformation would come from personal transformation. So that was a little bit the beginning of our journey. And then we produced a documentary called Monogamish. We interview back then Lila Martin and Esther Perel and Dan Savage and Christopher Ryan and then now slowly we're still doing a little production, but we find podcasts much more fast and effective and economical. And yeah, but in our DNA, the curiosity of what allow and facilitate and create transformation. So we had maybe roughly 50 guests, and ultimately we're interested in capture the cathartic moment of the transformation, and specifically we're interested in psychedelic and neo tantra, which we think are very powerful hook to catalyze this transformation. And neo tantra even more now by empowering women. But we'll get there. Tell us a little bit how did you go from being a jet setter DJ into like a reclusive tantra teacher in the jungle?
Oh, what a great starting question. It's funny because in my heart, I'm still very much a jet setter DJ. And even in my DJ days, I was very much a tantrika. So it doesn't even feel like that much of a shift for me.
Nice.
Essentially what connects the two for me is creating spaces that promote liberation for people, that bring people deeply, deeply into their body through community, through celebration. And so I really view DJing and Tantra, working with the energy, working with the liberation of the heart and the body as very, very similar. They don't even feel that different to me. But to really answer your question, being a jet setter DJ for me eventually took its toll on my nervous system. The nightlife took its toll. And so I really needed to find new ways to bring liberation and transformative experience into people's hearts and bodies. And I very much still weave, I'm an ecstatic dance DJ. I still weave music and movement because Tantra is so focused on breath, sound, and movement. I really still weave a lot of that into my offerings and into my facilitation spaces. So I haven't changed that much.
Nice. But what was the taking their toll? What was the, how did you feel? What was the symptoms of, How does taking a toll look like?
Yeah, so there's two pieces to that. The first piece was just the actual nature of the lifestyle of being up all night, out every weekend, sleeping during the day, just being out of my rhythm of nervous system really put me into a place of burnout and fatigue.
Yeah.
And also, what I realized was the thing that I loved the most about a dance floor was the human to human heart soul connection. And what I realized is that there was still a lot of trauma being played out, right? Not in a psychedelic creating a container way, but actually in a way that was perpetuating the pain body. And so that was really the shift for me, was really altering my perception of how can we create spaces that give this same feeling of an epic moment on a dance floor, but in a space of sobriety, consciousness, and presence, right?
But how that lifestyle was perpetuating the pain bodies?
Because in my perspective, when we are unconsciously habituating drug and alcohol use and dissociating from our body, right? Not in a held space of ceremony, but in a space that's leaky and uncontained.
Yeah, yeah, because you are in a state of absence. This is an important piece of this whole understanding of global transformation, because that's the first step, right? To realize that I'm in a lifestyle, or I'm in a relationship, or I'm in a certain container that I need to get absent from. So okay, so that was you felt that that lifestyle was not nourishing you, the pain body were ruling your life, and ultimately you were not satisfied, and so what happened then?
Yeah. So what happened was I made a very abrupt decision to leave the nightlife, to stop DJing, and to completely transform my lifestyle. And what I realized was through that transition, and I also entered into a 2-year container of sobriety during that time as well.
Mm.
And what I realized was when I left the nightlife and all of my friends and community, I felt so lonely. I felt so disconnected. I also didn't know how to access the states of ecstasis and catharsis and liberation that I was accessing through the dance floor and through drugs and alcohol. I did not know how to access that through my own body in a sober space. And so I felt so far away from liberation and joy. And so that's what really introduced me to Tantra was coming into my field and talking about the path of ecstasy and the path of bliss and ecstatic awakening. And I was like, there's something here for me. There's medicine here for me to create a new bridge back to my ecstasy body, back to my heart, back to my sexual liberation, but in a way that doesn't compromise my safety or my well-being.
Beautiful. But so what advice do you have that for people that are scared of those 2 years of solitude?
I would say that it's holding on to the vision of truth of the new lifestyle that you're wanting and willing to create for yourself, and to trust so deeply that that new lifestyle is on its way. And it doesn't have to be in solitude, right? It doesn't have to be. In fact, it shouldn't be in solitude. It's really important to actually find ecstatic dance communities, supportive communities, mentors, guides, teachers, right? Supportive communities that can help create the bridge to the new world for you. And there is also power in the solitude as well, because it's in the solitude that we learn to self-source our joy, self-source our love, and not depend on other people to feed from to get that. So there is power in the solitude as well.
Beautiful. But how did Tantra arrived in your field?
So Tantra arrived in my field actually. I had just recently come back from a trip to Ibiza about 15 years ago. And a Tantra teacher came into my field. And this was around the time that I had entered into sobriety. And he gave me a book called Tantric Awakening for Women. And I remember the cover, it was just like this woman with like all her chakras beaming open and total bliss and ecstasy. I'm like, that is how I feel on a dance floor.
Mm.
That is how I want to feel in my body. That is how I want to feel in my heart. And so I read this book And it just opened up a whole new possibility for me. And little by little, Tantra teachers, mentors, guides, teachings, books just started literally falling into my path. Like the path found me. I didn't have to go and seek it, but what I did put into my heart was that desire to know more and to learn more. And it just started coming into my life really effortlessly.
Beautiful. But so, and then you started the first course. You started with Laila Martin with the Vita program.
No, I did Layla Martin's program 2 years ago.
Ah.
When I first started on the path of Tantra, which was about 15 years ago, everything that I learned was from one-on-one mentorships with guides and reading. I read every book under the sun there was to read about Tantra. And at the time, I also owned a yoga studio. And so I started teaching Tantra classes to our community there. But really, initially, it was mostly the books that I was reading and then the one on one guides that I had. It wasn't later on in my journey until I decided to commit to this as my offering did I start to really deepen in my mentorships and guides that I was receiving.
But if you don't mind, if it's not too intimate, but how did you start, rewiring your body into this new form of pleasure, more holistic, more metaphysical? How this search in this new practice has evolved experientially for you?
Yeah. So it's been, I would say for me, the journey really started with and continues to be through my own self pleasure practice,
Mm.
really deepening a relationship to my body and knowing that I am the source of pleasure. I am the source of love. And that if I choose to, I can share that with someone who is also a source of their own pleasure. But it was really my own self pleasure practice that brought me home to my body to really reclaim that and little by little begin to take sovereignty of I don't need a substance, I don't need a partner, I don't need anything outside of me to have the experience of pleasure. It is all within me. And then from there, I can pour that out into others through relationship and experience.
Beautiful. So very, very empowering. So the self exploration into this new empowerment state, and the desire, the didactic desire to then pass this wisdom, sort of like progress in parallel. And there was a moment where you decided to be a full time teacher, because I heard somewhere that you also decided that also the yoga was too much of a distraction, the yoga center.
So yeah, so when we had the yoga studio, like I said, I was teaching tantra classes, but my main job at the time was running the management of the company, and we had a large company. And what happened is in 2020, when the pandemic hit, we were mandated to close our studio and then eventually closed it permanently 4 months later. And the day that I closed my studio doors, I made a vow to commit myself wholeheartedly to the tantric path as a teacher and as a guide, because all this space had opened up in my life and the path was calling me forward as a leader and as a mentor and as a teacher. And I knew that after 10 years of studying this wisdom and embodying it, that I was now ready to transmit this wisdom. I trusted myself so deeply to actually be a light bearer and a torch bearer for the tantric path.
Beautiful.
So pandemic ended up really serving, even though at the time it wasn't clear, it really served me stepping fully onto this path as a teacher.
Yes. And from my point of view here in Ibiza, we see many people. One of the recurrent theme is that this moment in time will be remembered for many things, but also about a second wave of feminism, of woman empowerment. Right in the 60s, it was very almost political. It was like almost, it was like the woman had the right to be as promiscuous as men and didn't need the man. But now this second wave is much more spiritual in a way. It's much more softer. It's much more inclusive. It's much more holistic. And I think that it's impacting society. It's everywhere. You go on Instagram, on social media. It's there like woman empowerment, neo tantra courses everywhere. But so my question is, I'm in my 50s. I have, many friends have been married for 20, 30 years. And, if only a few years ago, they were not discussing that. But now more and more, comes out that the women are not satisfied
Mm.
by the sexuality, by the emotional support, and so what advice, of course, the best thing would be to like come and work with you. But if someone is not ready to reach out to a tantra teacher, what would you say of all these women that are stuck in a sexless marriage, for example,
Mm.
um, on how it is their right to reclaim their pleasure, and how they should explain their husband
Mm.
that they have this opportunity to create a sacred container that would expand their connection with everything. Does it make sense?
Absolutely. It's such a beautiful question. And to speak to your first piece, you're absolutely right. Like the feminist movement happened, and now which paved the way for the feminine to really rise and have her voice. And now we're really in a space of union, of divine union, and merging between the masculine and feminine forces on this planet, which is what Tantra teaches. Tantra means weave in Sanskrit, and we're being taught how to weave the masculine and feminine in power together. And so, to answer your question, for a woman that maybe isn't quite ready to work with a teacher or seek deeper support, but really wants to have more satisfaction and pleasure in her life, what I would say to that is for women to remember that women are actually the leaders in the relational space. Why? Because we are so deeply embodied into our hearts and into our wombs, which is the energy space that leads a relationship container. And so the first piece is for a woman to really reclaim her sexual sovereignty. So instead of blaming and shaming the partner or the person that she's with sexually for not pleasing her, for not being satisfied, is to take full responsibility first and foremost for reclaiming her pleasure,
On
to
her own.
on her own, first and foremost, to reclaim, to make pleasure a priority in her life, to make it a non-negotiable, to be something that she stands for. And when I say pleasure, I'm not just referring to sexuality. I'm referring to rest and digitally detoxing and creativity and eating slowly, just slowing it all down, coming back into the body. And when a woman prioritizes her pleasure for herself, that naturally descends her back into her body and invites, on its own magnetism, invites the man back into a sexual space with her to share in the pleasure that she's already emitting. So women are like flowers, right? So if we can feed our own soils and nurture our bodies and slow down, then our flower of sexuality and eros opens back up again, and we become magnetic to our partners. And the sexuality sort of restores itself. So to simply answer your question, it would be to invite women to drop deeply back into their bodies. Slow down.
Beautiful. And what do you think? Just to stay on this theme of couple in troubles. I remember when my wife and I we moved from New York to Ibiza for lockdown,
Mm-hmm.
and then we had bought a piece of land here years ago, and we were building a house, and I remember reading the main cause of divorces were like changing country on a family level, new school for the kids, etc. Build a house together, and then at the time I have a cannabis addiction, like 4 years ago, and so those three things happen at the same time. So we were a little bit on the rocks, and I remember this friend of mine say, "Listen," he gave me The Way of the Superior Man. He gave me the David Data book, and he said, "Leave and study this book, not just read it, study it, understand it, embody it, and then come back." Do you subscribe to this model of the man being in loving presence, the bed of the river, and the woman being the water in divine flow? And how do you explain that to a more traditional couple that never heard these terms?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. So yeah, I absolutely subscribe to basically polarity teachings is
Well,
what you're
exactly, exactly.
describing. And that's what really the bedrock of Tantra is all about is polarity, masculine, feminine, yin, yang, light and dark, right? And coming together in those spaces. And your metaphor that you used of the masculine being like the bed, the containment, the safety, the security of the river that guides the feminine flow of aliveness and eros towards the direction, right? So 100%. And David Data is a beautiful example of masculine polarity, and there are many teachers of feminine polarity. But what I also believe and know too is that we all have both masculine and feminine energy within us. And in order to be sovereign in our relationships, we don't, as me as a woman, I don't only want to have feminine embodiment, I also do need masculine embodiment as well, so that I can hold and contain myself and hold and create safety for myself. And so that I can show up for the feminine in my man when the feminine heart in my man is wounded and needs tending to, so that I can also show up with loving presence with my inner masculine, right? So I really believe in dynamic polarity. It's more holistic. And how I describe that to people that are very new to sort of the languaging around polarity and Tantra is I just use the metaphors of nature, because nature is the Tao. It is the way, polarity is the way of nature. And so I'll use the metaphors, right? Just like you said, with the riverbed, or like the soil and the sun, right? Or like the seasons of nature that go through their cycles. So that's usually the languaging, because nature is universal. No matter what language you speak or how versed you are in spiritual lingo, everybody knows nature. So those metaphors tend to really land for people.
But can you elaborate a little bit on this idea of okay, the polarity between masculine and masculine and feminine is not necessarily a gender description. We both have both. But so what you're saying is that it's important to take turn, like when a man wants to be more into the feminine and being held, um, it's important that it's clear who does what. Otherwise, we lose the polarity. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so in a male, let's just use like a male female, man and woman dynamic just for simplicity. In order to maintain polarity in that relationship, what matters is that one person is in the masculine energetic and one person is in the feminine. And now, naturally, a woman is mostly going to want to reside in her feminine energy, and a man's going to want to be in his masculine energy. And that's what creates the polarity. And there are times when the man wants to soften into his heart space and needs more of the masculine energy from his partner or leadership from her, and vice versa. So it's important to be well versed. And this is really what Tantra teaches us. It's important. You want all keys on your piano to become a masterful player of life. You want to know how to play all those keys. And if you're just playing the white keys as a woman, and you don't know how to play those black keys, you're not going to have a full, well-rounded symphony. And it's the same for the men, because the more I understand the masculine energetic in myself, the more I can love and worship the masculine in you, because I'm intimate with the man within me already and I understand what he needs. So it's really about Tantra really teaches us how to come into wholeness instead of being half of a whole, standing on one leg and needing another person in order for me to stand fully is what traditional polarity teaches us. What I really believe is that we should both be standing on two legs in strength and in sovereignty. And from there we dance. And there we dance.
Yeah, beautiful. Because one thing that one of the many takeaway from the book was that we as men, we tend to treat our woman like a friend, like a male friend. So like a male friend comes to you and say, listen, I have a problem. And it's like, okay, let's break it down. We're gonna pros and cons. We do it a spreadsheet Excel. We do we take it very rational. But the woman, when comes with you with a problem, she doesn't want a solution. She just wants to be heard. She wants to be held. And it sounds very basic stuff for you, but so many men are still stuck in this idea of, how can I help? Why,
Totally. Because in that space, a man is actually trying to connect with the woman's masculine, her mind. He's trying to connect with her logic and her strategy and solution, when actually what he needs to connect with is her heart. She wants to be heard. She wants to be expressed. She wants to be seen and felt, not solved. She doesn't want to be solved.
Yeah. Yeah. And she wants to be free to be like the water or like the weather, to be, sun in the morning and storm in the afternoon. The weather is always right.
Exactly.
Yeah, I feel that there is a lot of conversation going on these days.
Yeah.
And that's very healthy. But so, just to staying on the relationship topic, Tantra practitioners are traditionally monogamous or polyamorous? Is there a correlation or is completely independent?
In my opinion, it's completely independent. It's one thing that happened in the West when Osho brought Tantra to the West. It became sexualized. Right? It became sexualized. And I think that actually we needed that because it came around at the time of sexual liberation in the 60s. But Tantra, sexuality is just one leaf on the tree of Tantra. Tantra is so much more than sexuality. Right? So Tantra is really about the liberation of sexuality and of heart space and breaking down conditioning that society has placed upon us. Now, there is a lot of societal conditioning around relationship dynamics of it has to look this way, monogamy for life, right? Like that's like, we're just given like one model. What Tantra invites us to do is to come into truth, no matter what that is for you. So for some people, when they enter the sexual liberation and heart journey, they realize that actually being in a confined traditional monogamous relationship is no longer true for them. But some people realize that it's the ultimate truth for them and divine union is the way and sacred marriage is the way. So to me, Tantra and relationship dynamic styles are unrelated, but you often see them in the same space because people that reach for Tantra are looking to become free from societal conditioning around sexuality and love. So you see them in the same space, but they are unrelated.
Do you mind if I ask your relationship preference?
Yes. So my relationship dynamics have changed so much throughout the years and for my personal exploration in this space. So the last 2 years of my journey, 5 months prior to where I am, I've been in open relationship dynamics. And this has really, really served the liberation of my heart space and my sexuality for me to break down the conditioning of jealousy, of fear of abandonment, of scarcity, and to step into a completely liberated space. And now that I've been through that chapter and integrated freedom in my heart and in my womb, now I'm ready to enter into divine, committed, devoted union with one partner that I devote myself to fully and bring all the liberated eros that I have in my body and all the liberated love that I have into a held sacred container, right? And within that sacred container, I also am a temple priestess as well. So I hold spaces of sacred sexual exploration for people and the community to explore their sexuality in safe ways. So within my container of divine union, I also desire for there to be room and space to follow our desires when they're present in safely held containers, right? In a safe and sacred ceremonial space that's sober, that's grounded, that's reverent, and then be in our divine union always. That's what I'm seeking.
Yeah, sober, grounded, and reverent, and in total consent and boundaries, and yeah. But so, and how was these 2 years of non-monogamy for you? Was like a roller coaster? How did,
It was wild, it was wild. On my podcast, I just released a 2-part series of the 10 gifts that I received from it and the 10 hardships and lessons. And I really went deep into it. It felt like a 2-year medicine ceremony for me.
nonstop?
It taught me so much. It allowed me to see all the wounding that I held in my body around comparison, around jealousy, around not enoughness, around contraction in monogamous relationships. It allowed me to celebrate my pleasure and have the courage to declare my desires and my wantings, to find my voice, make my needs and requests known. Like it really empowered me. And it allowed me to open my heart to not just open relating through sexuality, but also through my love as well. When I was in a very constrictive monogamous relationship dynamic, I wasn't allowed, and my partner wasn't allowed to flirt with other people, to hold hands with other people, to be intimately touched, in a soft and gentle way by other people. And what I realized through open relating was it takes a village for this heart to feel loved and nourished. And I can do that without sharing my erotic sexual energy with anyone else. But my heart wants to love many and serve many. And so that's really what I learned from open relating, was how to love many people, even while keeping my sexuality contained to one person.
And how did you deal with, because of course the freedom was reciprocal. So how did you feel about your lover going on in different direction?
Oh, it was, initially we eased, I had two partners throughout that time. I had two primary partners throughout that time, separate from each other. We eased into it. So this is a very important piece. The nervous system cannot handle just opening overnight into open relationship dynamic. It will blow out your nervous system and put you into fight, flight, or freeze. So we eased into it. It started off by just talking about who we're attracted to, right? And who perhaps we have a crush on, and allowing ourselves more freedom to flirt with other people, and then maybe going on a date with another person, but no physical contact. So we eased into it. So I think that's a really important piece to say. But when we got into the deeper pieces of opening our fields towards other lovers, it put me into the deepest spaces of ceremony, because it allowed me to sit with the medicine of my grief, of my heartbreak, of abandonment, but consensually,
Yeah.
not through betrayal or lies or cheating or shadow, but open,
Yeah.
right? So in a way that felt also so healing. So it allowed me to meet the deepest pain in my heart. And I'm so grateful for that, because I was able to meet the deepest pain in my heart. I was able to bring unconditional love and presence to those spaces and anchor in unwavering worthiness into my being. Unwavering worthiness into my being that is independent of a lover or a partner. So I'm so grateful for those times, right? And now that I've embodied that, it's like I've integrated the lessons. I no longer need open relating, because I have those gifts in my transmission, in my being, right? So I can release that lifestyle.
Wow. It should be like in the marriage contract. Now we do 2 years of open relating, and then, but let me ask you this, because is it fair to say that, going through life, and you can either respond or react to life, right? To a life event, right? You respond when you there is a when you respond when you respond from your authentic self, and you react when you react from your wounded self
Your pain body, yeah.
through the pain body. So sometimes in life is not black and white. There's a little bit of both, right? So how do you, because the way you mention it, it's very grown up, very mature about, having the opportunity to using this feeling as the situation as a mirror to look my own pain body. But sometimes there is just a very healthy pain of losing someone you care.
Absolutely.
So how do you determine when is a reaction to a pain body and a child and a childhood wound, or just a very healthy fear to lose someone you like?
Yeah. So are you saying, like, how do you know the difference if it's your pain body responding versus like your authentic heart responding?
Yes.
Yeah. So a simple way to answer that question. So the energetics of an emotion, an emotional charge, an emotion such as grief or sadness or anger or joy, actually only takes 90 seconds when fully expressed to move through your nervous system and your emotional body.
Mm.
So if you're experiencing an emotion in the present moment that's here and now, that's not your pain body or trauma response, it will move through you very quickly and fully. If it's triggering your pain body, if it's touching a wound within you,
It stays there.
it's almost like you get taken back in time to,
Mm.
like, now you're a 4-year-old and like your dad's leaving you on Christmas Day, right? Like, or whatever, like the initial trauma was, or you're 13 years old and your boyfriend just broke your heart for the first time. It's almost like when your pain body is activated neurologically and physiologically, your nervous system is going back in time to the imprint of the original wound.
Yeah.
And so a big part of the liberation journey is, and I work deeply with the nervous system when I work with clients, is liberating, removing, integrating, and shaking the shame, trauma, and pain out of the physical body and nervous system, so that when you're presented with a difficult emotion, you're able to respond in real time and not project and respond from a place of trauma, right? And of course, this can often take years for people
Exactly.
to fully integrate their trauma body, because we've got a lot of trauma. We've got a lot of us have a lot of trauma, and so this is why I'm so passionate about this work, is so that we can all come back into our hearts in the here and now and respond with compassion and still feel anger. You're still going to feel pain. If you lose someone you love, you're still going to feel grief, but you're going to learn how to move it through your body and express it and emote it and take full responsibility for it without projecting it onto the person that's in front of you because it's too painful for you to hold.
Yes, but so open relating is not for everybody. It's for people that have done a serious amount of work on yourself. And I'm not, making the subconscious conscious is probably like lifelong
Yes.
endeavor, but there should be a certain amount of understanding of the subconscious material linked to fear of abandonment and stuff like that.
Yeah. So if someone were to have a desire to enter and a curiosity to enter into the open relating space as a tool for transformation, what I would say to that is, first of all, that you are in a relationship dynamic that is already healthy and
Yeah,
well and actually
exactly.
sexually thriving and
Yeah,
intimate.
it's not gonna fix it. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It is not going to fix it. You want to have a connection that's already rooted in safety and
yeah,
trust.
yeah,
And you yourself need to be at a place in your life where you are anchored, safe, stable, that you have the tools and know how to move your emotions, have communication tools, authentic relating, nonviolent communication. Right. And so this is a lot of the work that I do with people in my community and in my life, is actually sort of prime them and prep them for it, open relating if it's something they desire, because you need a grounded nervous system to hold this level and capacity of charge and emotion and challenge. You need to have a very healthy nervous system to do that. And what's trending nowadays is sort of like the Burning Man culture of like, let's open relate and be on psychedelics and be ungrounded and not be rooted in our bodies and be dissociated. Not going to work. It's going to put your nervous system and pain body into fight or flight, and it's actually going to re-traumatize. And we don't want that. We actually want to heal the trauma. So groundedness, sobriety, consciousness, and true presence and safety are necessary to enter the realms of open relating. And of course, not everybody's going to do that. But I think, hey, let's make this easier and more healing than it is, damaging for people in the
yeah,
long.
yeah. Um, yeah, that's super interesting. And another cliche that people think is that this Ista or temple night is a container for promiscuity, but actually my experience is actually the opposite. It's the more you learn to understand this energy and um, and really understand where it's come from, and making friends with it and feel it all around your body, the desire of promiscuity, the desire of the body to body actually decrease.
Yes, exactly.
Can you say that better than me?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it beautifully, and it is a projection. People, um, and that's why I specifically love to use the word temple space as a place
Mhm.
as opposed to play party, because I think they're very, very different. But ultimately, you're right. A temple experience is in and of itself a medicine ceremony, except there are no substances other than love and eros. That is enough. And we enter into these spaces to say to ourselves, who am I when I dissolve shame and shoulds and should nots from
Mm.
my sexuality? Who am I? And that may mean that you are wildly erotically expressed. It may not mean that either. It may mean that you are very contained in your sexuality, but because you choose to be, not because you should be. So it's a place to find the chains of shame that are around our sexuality and hearts, and in a safe and sacred container, dissolve them and see who you are underneath that. And just like you said, when you can enter a space where all is welcome, it takes the charge out of it because it's no longer in the shadow.
Exactly.
It's no longer behind closed doors and down dark alleyways that people are exploring their sexuality. It's in a sacred light of day place. And when you can explore it that way, it takes it out of your shadow. And when something's not in your shadow, it's not trying to come out the back door sideways through your unconscious patterns and behaviors and addictions.
Beautiful. I keep on thinking about couples around us that are struggling. This is maybe it's outside your traditional consultancy job, but when do you know that it's time to break up?
That's such a great question. It's such a great question. And the way that I see, I think everyone has a different perspective on why they're in relationship and what a relationship container is for. The way that I see relationship is this relationship is soil for the seeds of who we are to thrive and to bloom and to come into harvest so that we can share our gifts with the world in a bigger, better way than without each other. When a relationship container begins to actually constrict and dim the essence of who you are and what you came here to create, and it no longer supports and liberates that, but actually constricts that within the relationship container, it's time to really look at whether or not the relationship container is serving. Right? And this goes for all relationships, not just marriages and intimate partnerships, but business collaborations, friendships, relationships to where you live, right? If a place is no longer encouraging your growth, if someone's no longer encouraging, supporting, and celebrating your growth, then you have to really ask yourself, what is the service in this relationship? And ideally, a relationship should be we both plant ourselves in this soil and we harvest and bloom and thrive because of this container. Doesn't mean it's always going to be easy. Sometimes we're going to have a storm to weather, but that strengthens our roots, right? It's a sign that a relationship container is out of alignment and out of integrity when the relationship container itself is actually diminishing your growth, diminishing your heart space, and not supporting and celebrating your expansion and your aliveness, right? So, and I believe in doing the steps, taking responsibility, doing the couples work, right? Doing the Tantra retreat, doing the things that are needed to sometimes reset a relationship and repattern and reprogram. But there has to come a point where if the relationship is dimming the aliveness of the individuals, then it's not serving either of you. And it's also not serving your greater mission on this planet, because we need to be supported and loved in order for us to serve our purpose, right? So it's a matter of if it's dimming your aliveness and your sense of joie de vivre, as opposed to giving you a feeling of inspiration and creativity, even in the shit. Because you could be going through like the hardest thing together, but you could still be like, we are in this, we're going to move through this. I feel alive in this still. I feel inspired to work towards a solution. Right? You can still be in the mud and be focused on healing and growth.
Yes, yes. One of the container I see is this idea of the mirroring each other for growth,
Yeah.
right? And this is the most obvious thing. Um, but people talk about sacred union and sacred container. Tell us a little bit. How do you incorporate spirituality on a couple level? What does it mean, sacred container?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm of the belief that everything is sacred. And we really don't need to label anything as sacred or not because it's all sacred, right?
Mhm.
However, by labeling something as sacred, you're essentially saying that I am devoted to this, whatever it is that's sacred to you, this sacred relationship, this sacred work, this sacred mission. I am utilizing this to serve something beyond myself. That's the spiritual component, right? So if a relationship container is a sacred union, you are claiming and devoting yourself that this relationship is here to serve the collective, to inspire love and change and transformation and growth, not just to ourselves and our mirroring, but to everyone around us. And when you're claiming something as sacred, you're remembering that you are supported by source. You are supported by the unseen in life, that there's a mystery to it. So even when you're in a dark time, you know that this is serving. There's medicine here.
So there is an element of trust.
There is a huge element of trust and humility, because it's not about your own ego and your own wants and your own needs. It's about in sacred union, you're utilizing your relationship in service to the whole community.
Yes. And like, Rupert Sheldrake would say, you put out into the morphogenetic field this process of integrating your shadow and being whole, and that affect this energy can be felt and utilized by other people.
Absolutely. Especially in relationship to two humans in union, there's something powerful that happens when the sexuality, love, and higher consciousness of two humans come together. You create a force field of healing around you that is a transmission without even saying anything. You don't have to teach love. You don't have to teach sexuality. Just being in love changes the world around you.
Yes. But so I have to ask, so is there a space for a psychedelic practice as a couple practice?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm a big believer in plant medicine and in psychedelic medicine. And this is where what I had referred to earlier is my journey of unconscious medicine use actually allowed me to land into a place of conscious, sacred, intentional medicine use. Right. And so I think that I really follow the work of Jamie Wheal and his book, Recapture the Rapture.
Yes.
He talks a lot about hedonic calendaring, where when we put peak experiences of catharsis and ecstasis into our life,
Yeah.
we actually heal on really deep levels. And so I think the key is that your psychedelic medicinal use as a couple or as an individual is done intentionally and with awareness, so that you're dissolving enough within you to release tension and trauma, but not dissolving so much that you lose